In this video, we will use our xpExplosiaFX sim that we use to advect the particles to reveal our number one. We will do this using its volume information. So let's get into Cinema 4D and we'll get started. So here we are in our previous scene. This is the cached countdown to advection scene. So we've got our really nice grains sim, which then is advected by this xpExplosiaFX sim. It's looking really nice, and then they dissipate and our bits of sand scale down to nothing. They disappear. So what we're doing this for is to get rid of the two, but then we reveal the one. So if I just make my one visible, so what happens here is, let's just make the grains system inactive, so we've just got less going on in the viewport, and in the xpExplosiaFX, let's just go to the display and turn that level of detail down. Okay, so we get this smoke, and where this is what we need to look at for our final scene. Where this smoke intersects our number one geometry, that is how we're going to reveal it using a neat rendering trick in Cycles. So that's what we need to concentrate on, this intersection of smoke and geometry. So what we're going to do is build this in a separate scene from this one that we're currently in. So what we're going to need to do is we need to borrow some elements. So we're going to need our xpExplosiaFX system. We're going to need the flow field, everything set up as it is. So before we copy that across into a new file, let's just take our splines. These are the splines that are being referenced by our flow field. Let's get organized. Let's put these splines into the other objects folder. All right, very nice. So then we'll select our xpCache. We'll hit Control-C to copy, and then let's go into a new file. All right, we can paste that in. Excellent. So we can just get rid of these cache tags on the xpExplosiaFX and the emitter, because we're not going to be using that. We're going to be recaching this and renaming some of these elements. So let's reactivate our xpEmitter source. So now we can just play in real time our xpExplosiaFX sim. Let's have a look. So everything's just keyframed as it was. There's our smoke, and it's working its way towards that number one. So just while we're working through on this, and I will explain to you how this setup works, let's just reduce the resolution of this xpExplosiaFX sim so we get some faster playback, and then we'll put this back to where it should be at render time. So in the solver, look, remember, number 2 centimeter voxel size is what we want for render. So remember that number. We'll just put this up to, say, 4. And then we'll get much quicker playback now, because it's a far less detailed sim. And we could also, because we have done that, remember we're going to have to increase the radius size of our particles, because those voxels are much bigger now. So let's put that up to, say, I don't know, 8. There we go. And then they're going to intersect that number one. All right, so what we can do is recache this, but we need more smoke. And this will become clear why in a second. So before we recache, let's just rename some of these elements now we're in a new scene. So we'll get our xpExplosiaFX domain, and let's change that from, this was called sand advection in the previous file. Let's call this smoke fill, because we're going to be filling our number one, and we call that EFX source smoke fill. So we'll rename that emitter as well. Great. So to demonstrate what we are doing with this technique and how we're going to reveal this number one with this, what I'll do is open up a Cycles 4D real-time preview window. So this isn't a rendering part of this series. We're still building the scene, but if I set up a very quick rendering system, you will see how this technique is going to work. So let's just set up a really super basic Cycles 4D rendering scene. So I'm going to put a plane. Let's put that plane way above our smoke. There it is. This plane's going to be a light. So what we want to do is create an emission texture. So let's go to Create, Cycles 4D, Surface, Emission. Here's our emission material. Let's stick it on our plane. So now if I go to Cycles 4D, real-time preview, it'll open my real-time preview here. Let's press play. And there, look, we can see, let's reduce the size of that down, say 60. So now, look, we can see that this is now a light, our plane, and it's illuminating our number 1. Let's just go into our emission, double click, brings up our node editor. Here's our emission shader, and we can increase the strength of that. Let's put it up to, say, 6. Okay, excellent. So we don't actually want to light the actual geometry in this way. What we want to do is use the smoke. So how are we going to do it? Well, let's have a look. We'll go to Create, Cycles 4D, Volume, and we've got all of these preset volume materials. So let's just get an xpExplosiaFX smoke basic. So it's a basic smoke material. And let's do two things. First of all, let's put this on our xpExplosiaFX smoke fill object. And look, we can see there we have got our smoke rendered. But that isn't what we want. What we want to do is just render this smoke where it is intersecting with our number 1. So how do we do that? Well, this is the really neat trick. Look, if I take this material and instead of putting it on our xpExplosiaFX domain, if I put it on our number 1, it's almost working. Look, we have got a few little bits inside the volume. It's not right yet, but it's almost working. So let's just open up this material and see what's happening. And do you know what? Let's dolly in a bit so we're closer to this number 1. Okay, put that size back up to 60. Right, so here is our volume texture. Let me just give you a little bit more room so we can see what's happening here. So what's happening is, in fact, let me make this more simple. I'm just going to delete these 2 color ramps. And I'll even take that color off. So what is happening is this. We have got our point density texture, and this point density texture is what reads the xpExplosiaFX volume information. So if I click on it, here are the attributes of the node, and it wants an object. So let's just drag in our xpExplosiaFX smoke fill. Okay. And if we have a look at our real-time preview, we're getting a little bit here, but it doesn't look quite right. And that's because what we need to do is we need to read this in world space. So if we read this in world space, there it is. So what is happening now is that volume density information is being read, but it is only displayed when it comes within the volume of our number 1. Let's just go to my maths multiply. This is taking the density information that's created by xpExplosiaFX, and let's just increase that, make it really dense. Look, so 50. So here's our smoke. So there we go. So now if we hit play on this, we're not going to see any of this smoke. Here it comes. It's simulating in our scene, but we don't see anything until it goes into the volume of the number 1. What a fantastic, neat trick. And this is how we're going to reveal the 1. So the smoke that we are going to render as smoke will be a kind of a blue color. And then the smoke that we do separately that is within the 1 volume will do as a green color. And it's going to give us a fantastic effect. So that is what we're doing here in setting up this separate number 1 smoke sim. Great, so let's just close those down. Before we move forward and make some adjustments, let's get this all saved up correctly so we're organized. So we'll go to File, Save As, and we want to make a new folder. Let's go to our library and do it this way. So here we have our folder structure. Let's go to New Folder. This one's going to be called XP Countdown 1 Smoke, and we'll just copy that name. Let's go into our new folder and we'll do another new folder, and this is going to be our cache folder, and we will paste our name in here and give it version, and hit save. Fantastic. Okay, so there we are. We have got it set up. We understand what technique we're doing here. Now let's make some refinements so we can ensure that this is going to be ready for render time and it's going to reveal our one how we want it. So, things to consider. We need, for this final transition, we need the one to be visible via this smoke setup for around kind of 2 seconds. So we need 60 frames worth of decent smoke intersecting this number 1. And with this existing sim that we have, that smoke is going to dissipate too quickly. So let's just increase the frames on our timeline, stick that up to 300. If I carry on playing, we get this really nice smoke, but it dissipates, and then there's going to be nothing in our scene. So let's just run through it again. What we're looking at is the start of the intersection of the smoke on the number 1 happens at around frame 120. So we need 60 frames worth from here of decent smoke intersecting this, which will give us kind of 2 seconds worth of the reveal of the number 1. So obviously that's going to get us up to, we need to get up to frame 180. So if we carry on, look, it's starting to dissipate here already, and this smoke isn't going to be rendered. It's only the stuff intersecting the number 1. So we basically need more smoke. So the way in which we're going to do that is we're going to keep our original setup as it is, because this works really nicely. But all we need to do is, look, we can duplicate our source smoke emitter. So let's hit Control and we can drag that down, and now we have another one. So now all we need to do is, remember, this is keyframed. The position of this keyframes this fall off, which tells us when the particles are emitted. So if we just highlight these keyframes here, look, and just move them along a bit, now we're going to get more particles emitted. Let's have a look. So we'll get the first emitter going up, and now the second emitter going up. So now we've got a second stream of particles working their way through. So we're getting more intersections. Excellent. But look, they're still fading away before we get up to our 180. So let's copy that again. And this one, let's just offset those keyframes. And let's just make one more copy. So now we've got 4. And let's offset the keyframes of the new one. So now we have got 4 different emissions of particles. Let's have a look. First one, second one, third one, fourth one. Loads more smoke. Remember, we're not going to see any of this, only where it intersects the number 1. And we're still getting it coming through now as we get to frame 180. So that's pretty good. Let's just get our Cycles 4D real-time preview window open again to get an idea of how this is looking. So here we go. We obviously don't see anything until we get that intersection. Here it comes. First bit. Second wave. Third wave. And it's all looking really nice and smoky inside here. Fourth wave just finishing up, and then frame 180 starting to fade. So that is, I think that's looking excellent. Fantastic. So what we could do here is, obviously remember we're in low resolution here, so let's go back to what we need to do for our production render settings. So xpExplosiaFX smoke fill. Let's go to the solver. Let's put this back down to 2 centimeters. We then need to go to all of our emitters. Let's go to emission, and we need to put our radius back down to 5 centimeters with our 2 centimeter adjustment. Remember, we changed that at the beginning. So now, obviously, this is going to play way more slowly because there's an awful lot of xpExplosiaFX information going on, but we need to have a look at this resolution. So here it comes. Here comes the second wave. Third wave. So I'll just hit pause there. Go to our Cycles 4D real-time preview. So here comes our initial fill, and you see this will be much more detailed. There it comes. Very nice. That's looking good. I'll pause that for now. Run through it a bit more. So lots more smoke happening. Pause it at 140. Re-render. Yep, so we've still got some nice detailed smoke in there. That's looking good. Keep playing through. So we're up to frame 150 now. We've still got our waves of particles coming in, our extra particles. Let's hit render there. Yep, still got some nice filling of that. And we're still, here's our final wave of particles moving through, which is going to ensure that we still have intersections as this is moving on in the timeline. Let's hit play again. Yep, so still nice detail. So remember, this is the really basic bog standard shader here for the smoke. We're going to be making some refinements and making this look much nicer when it comes to our rendering projects, but we're just looking at the simulation at this point. So here we're getting up to frame 167 and it's starting to look a bit sparse. Hopefully we will get some more coming in. If not, we might need to up the particle count. Just pause it there. So we're at frame 170. Still got some smoke in there, but it is getting much more and more sparse. Final wave of particles. So yeah, this is looking a little bit sparse now. Let's just stop that there, press play. Yeah, so at higher resolution, it's not quite giving us what we want. So let's just take our emitter and make another copy. So now we have 5. Let's offset those keyframes. So we'll now have another wave of particles. So the final wave, let's just deactivate the first emitters. So the final wave only happens at frame 128 odd. And what we could do is actually, look, with these ones, we are getting our final wave of particles, but we don't have a huge amount of particles. So for the last 2 emitters, let's go to the emission and let's just up the birth rate to, say, 3,000 per second. Now, it isn't going to give us an enormous amount more, because remember, we have no intersection selected, which means that particles can't be born in an intersected state, which means we're going to get far fewer than this big birth rate number may suggest. So this isn't going to go completely nuts. Let's have a look. You'll see we'll have more particles here with this final emission, but it won't be 10 times the amount. There we go. So we've got more. That's better. And we've got a few more particles now creating some smoke. Excellent. Right. So let's reactivate all of those particle emitters. Let's play this through. So here's the first wave. Second wave. Third wave. Fourth wave coming now, just as the first intersections will be happening. Let's just hit pause. Let's open a real-time preview. So here we have this intersection happening now, coming in from the top and the bottom. It's looking nice. Second wave of smoke is coming through and filling up the WOM. Very nice. Just press pause on that. So here it continues. So we've got loads more on the fourth and the fifth wave of particles. We have lots more smoke because we increased that particle count. And it's just going to give us, let's just hit pause. It's going to give us enough smoke intersecting our number 1 to have it revealing nicely all the way through for that kind of 2 seconds that we really want of number 1 reveal. So look, way more smoke happening now because of these extra particles that we created by increasing that birth rate. Just hit pause on that. Let's just reposition the camera and hit play. Yeah, so nice and filled out at frame 160 still. We'll move forward. Remember, the magic number is kind of between 160 and 180. We still want some smoke penetrating that number 1. So here we are on frame 170. Hit pause. Yep, look, so frame 170 was still got some penetration all the way through to frame 180. Still got smoke. Very nice. Let's just hit pause on that. So last few particles moving through with the smoke. So now we're on over frame 180. We've got the last little bits which will then start fading away. Great. So I'd say that we're looking pretty good with that. This one is ready now to be cached. So let's look at getting that set up. So what we'll do is go to other objects. Let's go to our other objects pull down menu and bring in an xpCache. The xpCache, we're going to cache to external files. Let's find our cache folder. We'll click on here and go to libraries, MoGraph countdown, one smoke cache, hit OK. Okay, now we don't really need to cache all of these emitters. We only really want to cache the xpExplosiaFX smoke fill. So let's just do that. What we can do, there's a couple of ways. We can go to the inclusion and we can deselect everything here apart from our xpExplosiaFX. Or a quick way of doing it is just if we just change this mode from exclude to include, drag in our xpExplosiaFX, and now it's only going to cache the xpExplosiaFX. It'll only cache whatever has been dragged into this window. Okay, looking good. So let's just go to our cache object, back to the object tab, and hit build cache, and this will move along. So I'll pause it here and come back when this cache is finished. We'll see how long it took, and we'll have a look at that final simulation. So that cache has finished. It took 8 minutes 22 and we got just under 8 gigs of cache data. We've got all 300 frames cached here though, but it'll probably dissipate by what, frame 220? Yeah, look, so we don't actually need that much. Let's put our timeline down to 220. And we could actually, look, we can deactivate all of these emitters because now our xpExplosiaFX smoke is cached to disk, so we don't need to generate it anymore. So that's fine. So let's have a look. We've got our smoke coming out and we're looking at where it penetrates our number 1, which is where the render will happen. Let's just open up our real-time preview again. So look, we've got a profile shot here, look, but it's penetrating the number 1 all the way through. We've got these different waves of smoke coming through, which is going to look really nice. So we've got this nice smoky look in the number 1. Excellent, and it's carrying on all the way through to frame 180, which is going to give us 2 seconds worth, and then it starts to fade away. Fantastic. Okay, so we're looking good, so we can call that scene done. That's been a relatively simple one compared to some of the previous. So we can hit, let's just file, save incremental, so that's ready to go. So we've got to the end of all of our scene builds now. Everything has been built and cached, ready to go. So the next few videos are going to be building these scenes together, combining them, setting up lighting, setting up materials, and getting our renders sorted in Cycles 4D, and then taking those renders on and comping them together in After Effects.